Hey guys, welcome back to Get Smart with Rory. And today we have a very special guest. I'm joined by the CEO and founder of MindBank AI. Emil, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your company.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emil Jimenez. MindBank is a beautiful story that I always say was what started out as Daddy's quest for immortality, being inspired by my 4-year-old daughter, has turned into something that hopefully will be much, much bigger for humanity. So MindBank AI aims to be the world's first personal digital twin platform. And we have a beautiful story to tell, which I would love to share with you. And it all started about a year and a half ago. I was on the train with my daughter, and she was playing with her iPad. And mind you, she's 4 years old at this time, and she's playing with her iPad, and all of a sudden Siri pops up for the first time. And she asks me, "Daddy, what is this?" And I go, "Honey, it's Siri. It's like a friend. Ask it a question." You have to go, "Hey Siri," and ask it a question. And she says, okay. She thinks for a little bit and she says, "Hi Siri, do you have a mommy?" And then she asks Siri, "Does Siri like ice cream? Does it have toys?" And then starts asking Siri a series of questions and have a dialogue with Siri. And it was an amazing moment because everyone in the train at the moment stopped what they were doing. They were looking at this child playing and talking to Siri. And after about 10 minutes, she says, "Siri, I love you. You're my best friend." And that really like blew my mind because I was like, wow, my kid is talking to Siri. She just made friends with Siri. She had an emotional bond with her technology. And I said to myself, today she speaks to Siri, but one day in the future, I want her to speak to me like this, even if I'm not around. So I've been on this quest of how do I upload my wisdom, my thoughts, my love of some sort into the cloud so that my daughter can access this information. But we're going beyond that. It's also about cognitive data. So the things that we upload has a lot of emotional and cognitive value, right? How I'm thinking, what topics are covering this particular moment in time, what's my sentiment about certain topics. So all of this is feeding the MindBank platform. And so our aim is to create a personal digital twin of each and every human in the world so that we can move humanity forward.
All right. So just to clarify, at the beginning, you mentioned that your vision was some kind of digital immortality, but then you talked about like talking to Siri and having your daughter be able to interact with a future personal digital twin of yourself in the same way as Siri. So is that personal digital twin, is it able to think on its own, or is it like a very advanced scrapbook?
At this particular stage, it's a very advanced scrapbook that we're developing, right? What we aim to do is that we aim to have the data set available so that in the near future, once we have that predictive capability, we can have that conversation. So just to be clear, it is not a AI. It doesn't think on its own. That's not what we have in the pipeline right at this very moment. That's the vision. That's where we want to be. We want it to be at a point where, yes, it can predict what I might have said. Also with the case of transparency, right? I can definitely see in the future where my daughter, let's say, to keep that example, she would ask something to my digital twin, and the digital twin would probably say something, "You know what, your dad never answered this, but we believe with a 95% probability that he would have said this." And the digital twin states what it states. So that's where I see it's kind of like a scrapbook, a smart AI scrapbook. Where we want it to go, though, we definitely want it to go to it becomes this conversational, predictive entity of sorts. But keep in mind that from at least what we aim is that it's not an entity that can keep adding a life experience to this digital twin. What I mean by that is that my story is my story, and when my story ends, it kind of stops there, right? However, the data that I have collected over my life should be indexed, stored, and be able to be pulled from, right? It's a knowledge base of sort, right? It's not that my AI can go and learn and, hey, let me become a fighter pilot or something, and continue in that direction. But in an ideal world, they can pull from, it could be, it's like if you look at Siri, what Siri is, it's an interface to a database, right?
Yeah.
So Mind Bank would be an interface to my database, my mind, right?
Right.
You
Like
know, and
Siri is able to answer questions and it's able to converse, but all of that conversation is at least somewhat a prescripted routine based on how it's learned to interact with people. And then it all goes back to that database and being able to access sometimes a couple of other subroutines, be able to, do a calculator application for you, but
for
it's
example,
not actually a sentient thing of its own.
no, and not yet, let's say, and I'm leaving the window open, guys. I mean, I think we're not there yet, technologically speaking. We will be there, technologically speaking, relatively soon. And now back to the point of the value of data and what data set is there. Like if you think about what data trace and data, digital footprint you leave behind, if today we had the technology to do this, Rory, what data set would it pull from? Your email, your WhatsApp, your Facebook, and then you would ask a question, is that really you? Would you want a digital twin of your WhatsApp conversations? Like, is that a real honest representation of who you are? I don't particularly think so. If you look at people's Instagram and Facebook accounts and all this media, I would say it's a very different persona for the most part.
I think so. I mean, not just from a different perspective. I feel like people are becoming increasingly integrated with media these days, and that as far as who you actually are, I'm not sure that we can really like. We have a vision of ourselves in our head, but I'm not sure that that's any more accurate than any other representation of us. It's certainly not the face that we show to any portion of the world. So if there's enough data from scraping out of Facebook or particularly conversations with like WhatsApp and stuff, who's to say that that's not a sufficient data set?
Yeah, and we'll find out. I just think the hypothesis, right? This is what I'm just stating as a hypothesis, that your true self, you have to be kind of conscious of when you're putting information. If I ask you a question about your childhood, there's a lot of emotional texture in your response. There's a lot of emotion in the response in and of itself, which isn't probably going to be present in a WhatsApp conversation. That's kind of what I'm getting
Okay.
at. And if, let's say, my mom asks me a question or my daughter asks me a question, it's not the same response, or it should probably be the similar response if it's the same question. But what I mean in terms of the level of honesty between what I would say on a public platform like Facebook is very different from what I would say in a very private platform, like a conversation with my
All
parents or my brother or my kid,
right. Yeah,
And
that's fair.
what I mean? And that's what I mean by true self, right? Because look at it from a very simple perspective, job applications. People always, it's always like the best foot forward. Look how amazing I am. Look at all how, I can do everything. And, and then
Just
you
the
do
sight of lying.
yeah, it's exactly. It's just like, and there's like, there's wiggle room there. Let's be honest, But when it comes to, I don't know, personality tests and these things, for the most part, I think they're pretty accurate, but some people know how to hack it too. You know what I mean? Some people know how to they know what questions are being asked and they know the techniques and they know how to manage it. But I think if you haven't, I just hope, this is really a hypothesis. I would almost call it a hypothesis, where if, the platform is asking really private questions about your life with an end game of this being something that you leave behind as a legacy and building your digital twin. I hope that, as a human being and as a person, that you want to be your true self. You don't want to just say, you've got 1 million followers on Facebook and you're Instagram or whatever, and you're like the best thing since sliced bread, these
It's
are you're
it
going to get
sounds
very
to me like it's somewhere between it's almost a very nuanced version of being like a ghostwriter for a memoir in some ways. That
in some ways,
it's
and you're your own writer, basically, right?
yeah,
That's kind of what it is. It is, let's say from a technical perspective, it can definitely just pull that and create your story for sure over time. Definitely, that's called like a use case if you want to call it that. But you're documenting your own life story little by little. My dad said something really interesting the other day to me. And my dad's not a tech guy at all. And he said to me, we were having a discussion about life in general. He's like, life is just a series of data points. But he said it in Spanish, it sounds much better. In Spanish, it sounds much better, but it's like the word data, also datos, which is in Spanish, it's more like actions, right? Life is a series of actions or things, right? And I immediately put it in my head as data, right? So, and I was like, and then he's perfectly right. It is that. It's instances of life, right? That's what compiles your life. And if you're able to capture that, store it, organize it, analyze it, and create another, as you would call it, sentient being, that'd be pretty cool. Now, what you do with that sentient being, or what happens to that sentient being afterwards, that's a philosophical question that we can, debate on. But the true purpose, at least for what we intend to make it, is, a digital twin will help reveal a lot of things about yourself so that you can grow as a person, right? If you look at the digital twin industry, they make digital twins of factories so that they can optimize factories,
sure.
right? And production and things like that. Now, imagine if we can do that to the human being, right? How you think, how you, maybe some DNA data that can help optimize you as a human being. I think we have so much untapped potential, as a human race, quite honestly. Like, you have millions of people in poverty that if you can educate them and get them out of poverty, what impact would that have on the world, on humanity? How many, even within the United States, where you have millions of kids who are underserved and undereducated, or let's look at the whole, 50% of the world population who are women, right? Who have other issues to deal with. So, if this technology could somehow help in that way and for lack of a better word, level the playing field, right? That would be extremely powerful thing. And if you look at Gartner, right? So Gartner predicts that this technology would be global penetration within 5 to 10 years, about 1 to 5% of the world, right? So that's a lot of people.
Okay.
It's a lot of people, man.
It's a lot of people. I think people don't realize how much, when someone says, 1% of the human population, our minds aren't built to think of that kind of numbers. That 1% is like what, 700 million people.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is larger, I believe, than the entire population of the United States. It's
by like 3 or 4 times, you know what I mean?
It's a ridiculously huge number of people.
Huge number of people. And I hope also that it's not a rich versus poor type of people too, right? I hope it's like,
right.
So I hope it's, to some extent, it could be global distribution. And, and I know that this technology is not for everyone. I know that. But in the near future, it will be, because it's going to be synonymous with having a cell phone, right? Oh, it's my digital twin that's helping me in training. That's that's literally to the level that I want to build it at.
I mean, I think that the cell phone analogy is perfect because, say, 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, you'd say, Siri isn't for everybody. Not everybody is going to enjoy talking to this artificial secretary, whatever. But it turns out that today, more and more, particularly when you look at younger generations, there's like, you use it because that's the common use. It's easy. it is well designed for its purpose. So you,
Yeah, yeah. No, and to that point, I think I read somewhere that 40% of search is done by voice for population 25 and under.
for population 25 and under, yeah, I
It's
could
search,
believe that.
and that's I believe that too, actually. You know what I mean? And I think it's now let's fast forward 25 years, right? That same 25-year-old is gonna be 50, and that 25-year-old is probably gonna be more like 90% of their search is gonna be voice, and if not
If
more.
there's not already something even more intuitive by
Yeah,
then.
yeah, the brain chip or your mind bank already knows what you're going to search for.
Exactly. I once read a commentary on technology that within generations, basically, anything that was developed before you were 10 or so is just the way the world works. That's always how it's been. Anything between like 20 and 30, whatever, is new and fun, and you get used to it. But then by the time you're 50 or so, for many people, any new technology beyond that point is a heresy, which is destroying everything that we value as a culture. And
yeah, that's
people are slow to adapt.
pretty true. And I think there's definitely some truth to that. And the good thing about mind bank AI and what we're developing is that from the onset, I always wanted it to be voice. I always wanted it to be, and there's a psychology behind that, because, whenever I see avatars and these 3D renditions of people and stuff like that, they're cool, but it's not me. It's not, it's at least for now, the technology is not there that you can really say, wow, that looks good. I think it's much more powerful, someone's voice and using your imagination to visualize that than to just see the avatar and say, hey, this is me, and da, da, da. So, and I definitely, the 3D rendering and avatar type of things is something we might get into later on, and definitely much more from maybe robotics for sure. But to your point, I think voice, we're using millions of years of evolution to help, visualize the platform and create the platform, because voice is such a beautiful, powerful tool. Look at this podcast, right? And podcasts in general are boomed, right? You
Absolutely.
can just record this and share it, but people like the voice, right? People like
no, it's always, as someone getting into video, people will tell you all the time, you can, if it's all you have, use the terrible webcam, whatever, use your phone. Video doesn't matter. People will watch a pixelated slideshow and deal with it. But if your sound quality is off, people pick up on that, and just, the better your sound quality, that's always what people are going to focus in on. And same thing, you mentioned voice, and the information conveyed with that tonal response and all of that carries so much information, which is more nuanced than language is really capable of delivering. Although, of course, we try to do as much as we can, but there's a lot of subtle information with voice that you can't get just in writings, or even sometimes with video, if it's a stilted, prepared thing compared to a genuine response or any of that.
Yeah, no, and something that our advisor even suggested, because we're just at a tip of the iceberg when it comes to voice, what we can do with the voice file, right? And we were considering when we were developing this not to store the voice file at all, because we just do speech to text and we can store the text and it's much cheaper and it's just whatever. We don't need to deal with it. And he suggests, he's like, no, guys, you should definitely store the voice files, because he said, what's coming, to your point, right? The voice dexterity, right? What you can get out of the voice is mind blowing, right? And we're just barely scratching at the surface right now. So definitely, this is something that we're looking into for a number of use cases in health, and also just for the personality of your digital twin, right? That the way I speak, my tonality, my voice is what makes you you.
So the next question that comes to my mind is, a bit how far you are in development, because I hear a lot of, you're saying the use cases and that stuff. And I'm curious what the progress with MindBank AI is, but then also how much, as this kind of cutting edge technology company, do you feel limited by the technology of today, that you have these grand visions? Do you think that in 5 or 10 years or however long, that the kind of thing which you're striving as, cutting edge would become trivial?
Okay, so the first part of that question, where are we? So there's two parts to that story. So from a business perspective, we're in fundraising mode. So I'm raising our first round at the moment. From the product development perspective, we are in beginning phases of the development. We should have our prototype developed in our beta in about 4 months, let's say for beta testing. At the same time, we're working on our first AI model, which is a psycholinguistic personality model, which what that basically means is, to your tonality question and your wording, the words you say, the words you use say a lot about your personality. So if you're intrinsic, extrinsic, and if we use, let's say, a Myers-Briggs type of framework, if you're INTJ or whatever the case may be, we can kind of set a framework around the person based on what words they're using. And this is based on about 15 years of research from a scientist called Pennebaker and a few others, actually. And our CTO is a specialist in cognitive science and linguistics. Okay. So, him and his team are kind of in the trenches as we speak with regards to this. So hopefully we can get that to, let's say, a commercially viable product within 6 months. 4 months, we kind of tested. 6 months or so, I think we've got something in our hands that could be tested and scaled. Let's put it this way. With regards to limits, honestly, there's two things that are limiting us. And I would say one is money, and the other one is, I would almost put MTT, money, tech, and time. Money in the sense that, we're limited by, we can't do everything. So we have to be really specific with the things that we can put into our pipeline, or into our R&D pipeline, or into our product rollout, because, I would love to do, honestly, we have about 5 different use cases of people who would pay us money now, Yeah. But it's just a matter of like, what is the easier path to route, So we have things in the pipeline for the Department of Defense that we can even play with, We have things for the healthcare industry. We have things for, our CSR program is a beautiful thing that I want to get off the ground too, which is capturing the dying languages and cultures of the world. There's over 800 languages that are going to disappear within the next 20 years. Because the people who speak it die, and there's no one else to pass on that baton. So this is something that we want to use our platform to create digital twins of these cultures, and at least have them have their language and their culture somehow stored, right? So there's so many things that we can do, but money is obviously a limiting factor. Technology is also a limiting factor, right? So from our perspective of technology, I mean that the predictive side of the technology is going to be it's still not there yet 100%. And I'm not talking about us specifically, I'm talking about in industry of AI in general, right? So it's still in its early phases, but I really think what happens is that it's the rate of improvement is, I would say, almost similar to like the microchip. What's that called? They're like, what's the term where everything doubles every year? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, because you mentioned it's with the as you say, the microchip capacitors, whatever, that doubles. Is it the Pembroke? I don't remember right now offhand.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, though. It's something similar, because I just give an example. Like, about a year and a half ago, GTP3 came out, and that was like, everyone's like, oh my God, the best thing since sliced bread. And then last week, Lambda comes out, and it was like, oh my God, it's so much better than GPT-3. And then 8 months from now, something else is going to come out, And so the machine of natural language processing is going to be constantly improving, but the psychology of the human language doesn't change that much. right? And I think that's where we're focusing on from a product perspective. The psycholinguistic side of things is much more, I would say that it's a deeper well to dig, in the sense that, you know, there's going to be a point where all this NLP language technology is going to reach a point of saturation where it's not going to get that much statistically better than the other one, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have a deep understanding of the language and all of the languages, right? Keep in mind, there's hundreds of them, right? Then, okay, language processing is okay, but what does that mean for the AI or the human being, right? Or the actual entity. So I think a psycholinguistic model is going to be extremely crucial in that sense, that we can always add a layer on top of whatever new technology is processing the language. But how these words are interpreted into speech and into the human being is a different story, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. So I think that's, you know, strategically, that's where we're aligning ourselves with that. And that's going to be, you know, 20% of revenue roughly is going to be spent on R&D as a strategic initiative. So when money goes up, that R&D thing goes up as well.
Yeah, of course.
You know, that's why I say time and money are, you know, I'm sorry, technology and money are relative entities. You know, I would love to see an equation like an Einstein, you know, E equals MC squared. I'm gonna figure that one out, you know. So, but yeah, that's where we are. And honestly, the beautiful things, I had a conversation last week with a potential investor, and he comes from, he's a CIO of from the health space. And he opened me up to so many other possibilities that I was like, man, these are things that I was thinking on our pipeline, maybe like 8 years from now, you know, 5 years from now. And he's like, no, let's do that next week. You know, it's like, all right, it's all about time and money. That's all it is.
I think that is a bit of the point with the time and technology and stuff, that what we think is possible, I think, is changing so much from day to day that it's almost a battle just to keep your mind far enough ahead that you're continuing to be innovative and not fall behind from the next innovation that somebody else thinks of while you're working on a project that you start. If you work on a project for 5 years, in 5 years, the technology that you were developing at the beginning of it is going to be completely not useless, but definitely not so cutting edge anymore.
Yeah, no, the good things are, you know, as a company, I'm thinking 50 years ahead in many things. Honestly, my timeline is at least 50 years ahead. The change that happens is where in that timeline things get brought up or back, you know. I think that's kind of the change. But we intend to go to space with this, quite honestly. I think this is
sure.
I tell everyone, my measurement of success is not when 1% of the population has that, or 5%, whatever. My measurement of success is really like when this technology is on another planet. When Mindbank AI is helping us, you know, colonize another planet, then I'm like, okay, we've done something for humanity. We've made it.
Absolutely. You know? And I think it's really great that you're thinking 50 years on, like, what you would want to be having it be doing in 50 years, because then even if technology advances faster than you anticipate, which historically it always has done kind of, even then, like, oh, so now I'm doing something which I expected 50 years from now in 20 years, at least you're still doing something with it, not just like completely being left behind because technology is developing and you're thinking of something, oh, I'll get this done and it'll be still useful 20 years from now, and you're working on the same thing for however long, and then turns out that it's kind of like all the math teachers in ages back that say, oh, you'll never just have a calculator in your pocket at all times. And well, it turns out that with technology growing, you kind of do. So
yeah. Like, no, it's completely true. You know, I think, and to that point, it's like, go back to the beginning of the story, right? Like when I saw my daughter having that conversation with Siri, I literally said to myself, wow, you know, what is her world going to look like 50 years from now? Right? Like, it's very different place, you know. It's going to be an amazing, and I'm just trying to go, and I'm not a futurist. I don't like read all these magazines all the time, you know. I like to think that and you know, I'm a very intellectually curious person, so I'm able to kind of foresee things and try to, and a humanist, so I'm able to understand the interaction of humans and technology very well. So I would say I try to put myself into my daughter's shoes 50 years from now, and I saw like that's such a cool place, right? Where time and space blend, literally. You know what I mean? It's, you know, it doesn't matter if you're in Tokyo or Taiwan or New York City, or if you're in the moon, Mars, Earth.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
it could totally be that level, right? And is it, if I'm talking to my dad today or my dad from 50 years ago, right? Which is another interesting perspective of life, right? Like
yeah.
I hope I'm not the same person 50 years from now, you know. I'll be 100 and I'll be 91, hopefully a bit wiser than I am now. But if my genes have anything to do with it, I might live a long time, because my grandfather died at 104.
All right.
My dad's in his late 80s, and he looks like he's, you know, he looks like he's in great condition still. So hopefully the gene pool inside is is strong,
Stay
you know.
strong.
Stay strong. Let's see, man.
So, okay, all the mind bank AI aside, since we're talking about future stuff, setting aside mind bank AI, what future technologies are you excited to see developed? And are there any technologies that you are concerned by, or that you have, yeah, that you think is worrying for humanity?
Ooh, I think the one that's most exciting to me at this particular point in juncture is the how the financial industry is trickled down to like the poorest person in the world. You know, like how you can be a farmer in the middle of some village in India somewhere, right? And you can do like a wire transfer, right? You can get money to your mobile phone, you know? I think
Sure.
that's extremely powerful, because if you look at the formula for GDP in general, right? There's one of the factors there is this velocity of money. How fast $1 or whatever, money can travel to another point or to another person. And when you bring that down to like such a basic, you know, like lowest level of the economic level, right? It just empowers them for potential, right? And I think that's one. The other part is the impact technology can have on education, because that's another way of how can education be trickled down to that? Because what's literally happening, or has been happening at least for the last 30 to 50 years, is the haves and the have-nots has been widening and widening and gone bigger and bigger. And it's to the point where you either have a great education or a really crappy education. It's the middle is very blurred, right? It's kind of it's at least from my experience or what I'm seeing. I don't know the numbers on this, but let's call it desk research, right? Where I see it in so many countries where it's just like, wow, it's either you're extremely talented and really smart and you've all the tools at your disposal since you were in Montessori at 2, you know, to you barely have a high school education, you can barely
Yeah,
read, you
if you're
know, and
lucky.
if you're lucky, you know, and then there's the really poor who have nothing,
Yeah.
basically, right?
No, I agree. The middle seems to be very washed out. And I'm going to steal that phrase, desk researcher, because I think that is professionally my title. But yeah, um, but as you say, with technology becoming more ubiquitous, its ability to spread and give information to everybody very much can be a good, it levels the field a lot.
Yeah, and I have one of the, say, 50-year plan use cases that I have is precisely that. Is like I was like, okay, what if we can build a digital twin of some farmer in the middle of nowhere, right? And this person can just ask the digital twin, hey, what should I plant now? And the digital twin looks at weather patterns, historical data of whatever, you know, and says, okay, with the highest, you know, chance, I would suggest you plant this because of X, Y, and Z. Gives an option. It's not that it's making them do it or making the person do it, but it's like, these are the options that might best fit you, right? That's the purpose of AI, right? To help you make decisions. As opposed to, oh, I'm just going to plant the same thing I've been planting, for example, right? The other thing can be students, you know, if they have a question, they don't have access to a teacher, right? You can literally ask this thing, you know, teach me algebra, you know, and
Absolutely.
and why not? That'd be amazing.
Well, and if you can, this feels to me like a step beyond my understanding of your personal digital twin, although maybe I'm just not
no, that's why I say it's a
thinking far
50-year
enough
plan. It's not the
ahead.
one.
Yeah, okay, 50-year plan, of course. But
Yeah.
consolidating the informational base of multiple twins so that you do have that when you want to learn math, it's not just that you learn math from a math teacher, but that you're able to borrow potentially from several experts in math at once and get this personalized math taught effectively by somebody who is like the best at teaching math for anybody. And so you just always have this access to the best possible teachers, assuming, of course, by that point that we can't just, download it directly or something. But
Yeah, exactly. That's, I think that might be the case, right? One day that you could just download it into your brain, but let's not put all our bets on one horse here,
sure, yeah.
But it could just be the digital twin of your own teacher. It doesn't have to be, Mr. Super Duper. I think there's also a cultural thing about learning. There's also so many so, let's put an example of some poor village in Africa or somewhere where the teacher is in the middle of nowhere and kids have to travel, 5-10 kilometers to go to school. I bet you they have cell phone access, like for the most part, these guys they get internet penetration is getting bigger, faster and faster.
Yeah, that's true.
So pretty soon the world will be completely connected from that perspective, right? And I think it's then the next step is that, that access information. How can we democratize that? So back to your question, I think the movement of money and the movement of knowledge through educational platforms like this is making a lot of changes, right, to the world. And I just gave you one small example. I went to my home country, the Dominican Republic, 3 weeks ago to visit my family. And of course, they're going through lockdowns and all this stuff because of COVID, but it's pretty open, surprisingly. But schools still were closed, if I recall correctly. Yes, schools were still closed. Some private ones are starting to open up. But one thing that it did, and I was super surprised, was that they did something amazing where all the radio stations and all the TV stations, the public ones, at least the ones on the airwaves, from I think it was 8 in the morning to about 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, only had educational content. I mean, channel 1 was for the 5th grade, channel 2 was for 6th grade or something like that, right? This one was for 5th grade, and they broke it down like this. And I was like, wow, they just democratized education in this country. Because before it was the haves and the have-nots, right? It was you went to a private school and some school and you had a great education, you're gonna have money, you're gonna have all the friends that have all the money, and then you stay on the top.
Yeah.
And then the complete opposite, right?
Well,
you're in a village somewhere, poor as hell, one school for 50,000 kids, and the teacher barely knows what the hell they're teaching you.
The concept of that to me from the United States that I think all of the United States media is so capitalist driven on getting that bottom line, making money, to the point where sometimes news, I understand both the frustration that we need to trust news and we need to allow for journalism to thrive, and we can't be calling news fake because that gets into a bad place. But also, news becomes so sensationalized because it's driven by making money, and you do get a lot more news that is not necessarily trustworthy because they're always looking for the money-making story, basically. And then the idea that in any country, you could just say, okay, because of this need for education, because of this lockdown that we're under, we're going to take over the airwaves and give education content. The idea that that's even possible just blows my mind completely, because
and they did it, and it was an amazing thing. And I even told my dad, I was like, we're in this country, it's a poor country relatively, right? They're going to reap the benefits of this in 10 years.
Absolutely. I think that's
these kids who are 8 are going to be 18, and hopefully, let's hope, knock on wood, the their chances have just increased exponentially, right? Those moments where they might have been stuck or they didn't have a good teacher or whatever, whatever happened. Maybe that's an opportunity for them, what I mean? And then you're going to see really quickly the kids who are smart and the ones and the parents who actually care,
And
who are
people
on
who are
top of their
driven,
kids,
yeah.
who are driven, and the ones who are not, no matter how rich or poor you are, you're going to see it. But it was a really interesting thing of how they did it, and I'm really curious to see how that changes, and also from some homes, back there it's like you see these women and men for that matter watching telenovelas like all day long, and they got cut, and the kids have to learn French, and the kids have to learn English, and the kids have to learn math, and history and stuff like that, and it was really brilliant. So I'm really, really curious to see how something as simple as that, right? You don't have to go high tech, man. It was radio and TV, and
yeah,
how that's going to change.
like you say, I
they
think
give over 1 million tablets to children. 1 million tablets is a lot of tablets,
it
with
is.
internet connection, by the way, with internet connection. So it's I'm really curious, I'm really hoping to see what happens in 10 years.
Like you say, I think that's the kind of thing that you do see the long-term bent rewards from it. So many politicians and whatever seem to be focused on the next 2 months or the next election cycle, maybe. But I do think for the long-term health of any community or society or the world, whatever, I think that the three big things that you cannot go wrong with putting more money into is increasing education, increasing research development for technology, and anything to kind of balance wealth distribution a little bit. If you fix those things in the long term, society is going to just take off from it.
Yeah, and to add to that point, I think the role of mind bank AI is a huge factor here is mental health, right? You have to also understand that in something like 60% of the U.S. population is taking antidepressants, if I recall correctly. I think I read somewhere, and I don't know how factual that is, but even if it's 30%, let's say half of that number, that's still millions and millions of people who are on antidepressants, and a lot of times, or anxiety medication. That's what it was, anxiety medication.
That I could.
So if you look at it, and if a lot of this is probably psychosomatic, or a lot of it might be psychologically driven, rather, and if you can build a platform that can help with this.
Yeah.
And Mindbank's role is not to replace psychologists, right? It's so that you can answer and store life's questions about your life, right? But just in the process of answering those questions for the digital twin, you go through a process of self-reflection, right? If I ask you about your childhood, if I ask you about your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, it actually helps you analyze and visualize that situation. It helps it gives you feedback about that. And that's just one step into the mental health of not just you, but of a society, right? We're integral parts of society. And we can't forget that your health, Rory, is also my responsibility, and my, I benefit from you being a good citizen. Let's put it this way, from you being fine. And we forget that, a lot of people forget about the individuality of the nation, and it's really, your neighbor's health is also in your best interest.
Absolutely. So with Mindbank AI, you talk about being able to look back, that your daughter or granddaughter or et cetera could look back and ask questions about your life, and they can respond, and it can be your personal digital twin who interacts like you. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Netflix show Black Mirror. Yeah,
yes.
Always kind of takes the most cynical view of technology, which I generally hate, because I'm very optimistic that while technology creates problems, it tends to also solve them, and we're growing alongside technology and whatever. But there is an episode in it that kind of is the premise of Mindbank AI, or a variation thereof, that they take a bunch of information. They do use the scraping Facebook, et cetera, method for it, but we don't need to get into their exact details of how they recreate the person. But it does make a digital copy of person who, in the episode, and I have the name. It's the I think first episode of second season. Yeah, Be Right Back. They have the main character, or hard to say who's the main character of the episode, but a person has this AI who responds after they die, and it's just using a cell phone that you can talk to them basically by text. And it follows the girlfriend of this person who is talking with effectively her dead boyfriend who died in a car crash, I think, or something. And it's just this long struggle basically of her initially thinking, of course, that no, it's just a computer. It's not the real person. I don't want this. This is not going to be anything. But then falling in love with the computer and becoming very depressed. And I think just having all this mental anguish over basically thinking the computer is the person, and just, yeah, very awkward, uncomfortable. I don't recall the end. I should have potentially watched that just before the interview to comment on it. But I guess circling back around, how would you reassure me or people watching that something like that won't happen with MindBank AI, that people aren't going to get stuck in this loop of wishing for the past and just shutting down because of the access to this facsimile of a person that's been left behind?
There's no guarantee that this can not happen. And I guess if you look at the psychological journey of death and acceptance, part of it is not believing the person is dead. Part of it is anger. Part of it is depression, and then there's acceptance, right? So you kind of have to go through your cycles, and you're right. Some people do get stuck. This is, like I keep saying, I don't want the platform to be about that. The platform is the complete opposite. It's about your life and how you can become a better human. The end output, right, what gets left behind, let's say, is a digital version of yourself that others can still interact with. But if you're a religious person, for example, and you have a tombstone of your person or the urn of a person, you can just as easily still talk to this tombstone, and people do. They visit, they leave flowers, they cry over, they talk to,
But they don't talk back to you, though.
but people, it's still a conversation. You're still having a conversation with someone, and it's, okay, they don't talk back, but you do have a conversation with the person. If you know what I mean. It's like if you pray, people say, I'm having a conversation with God. If you talk to your dead grandpa on a tombstone, you as a person feel like you're talking. Yes, you don't get feedback from that person or an answer, but maybe that's the problem. Maybe you are looking for an answer, and you don't get it. It could be the other way around. They could help you overcome something from that perspective, right? But back to the point, I think there is a cycle to this from a psychological perspective, and then you have to kind of overcome it. And sometimes it's very difficult to overcome the death of someone. People still cry every anniversary of their death or whatever, or the birthdays and stuff like that. And that's just the power of love, and I know that's going to be a difficult thing to overcome, but I see it from the perspective of, if I'm able to still be with you in some way and still be a part of your life, and you're still able to share me with your children and your great grandchildren, and then you can also then join me in this digital twin world later on. Let's call it digital twin afterlife, if they're going to call it that. Because it is an acceptance of our mortality, simply put, and you have to accept that that's just a way of life. And the beautiful thing is that now we have an ability to still be part of someone's life, still add value, still tell your story, still help, right? And as a father, I feel happy about that, you know. I don't know if my daughter is gonna how she's gonna react to it, you know, 50, 60 years from now when I pass away. I'm not sure. I hope she has the maturity to see that it's part of a life cycle. It's part of our journey, and it's a beautiful thing that you're able to still have a part of the person you love with you. You know, you see
Yeah.
so many things. You know, people becoming diamonds and trees, and you know, all kinds of stuff. And people still recording messages. You know, I mean, I know someone close to me
Yeah.
who was diagnosed recently with cancer. And she's like, you know what, this platform would be awesome when you launch it. But for now, I'm going to start recording voice memos for my kids just in case. You know what I mean? Because,
Sure.
you know, you come to the grips of like, wow, I'm getting older. This is stuff's happening. But for me, it's really about how can I be a better human while I'm alive? How can this platform help me learn more about myself so I can be better? And then at the end, if I'm this super human, you know, awesome, you know what I mean? And what value can I add to society after I'm gone? Great. I'm a database of some data set of experiences that something can pull from. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. That's humanity. That's why we write books, and that's why we do science, and that's why we do all the technological advances so that the generation after us can learn and take it and pass on the baton.
Yeah. And it's true. Like, I hadn't even considered until you literally mentioned it, the fact that people record themselves. And like, I do have friends whose grandparents passed away, and they found out when they passed away that they had like almost a year's worth of recorded messages and like happy birthday for the next 20 years, all separately recorded because they wanted to leave behind something to give comfort, to interact, to still be a part of people's lives after they passed. And yeah, those people do get a lot of comfort from that kind of thing. And having people's longer story, being able to talk about your life, or, you know, not your life, but the life of your dead father, and being able to explore his history in a detail which, let's face it, there's only so much time that we have with people. And it could be that my dad has a story which is relevant to my situation, but which wasn't relevant during his lifetime. And the fact that he's able to share that after the fact would be a very like, I'm just thinking about potentials of things that sounds like Mindbank AI would facilitate.
Yeah, and
Um,
it comes down to wisdom. You know, what I mean, like, one of the things is like store wisdom, right? And share it. And you'd be surprised, like, you know, we think that technology, the fact that we're in a modern age, that our parents know nothing and our grandparents know nothing, but they've been around, man. You know what I mean? It's like this, it's not much difference between, you know, misinformation during the 21st century and misinformation during the Second World War and the Cold War. Sorry, like,
no, I mean, no, it's,
same
you're totally
thing, just
right.
different scale. You know, it's copy paste. You know what I mean? So if you want to talk about, like, you know, relationship issues and love and money, it doesn't change.
Yeah. The more
It doesn't
things change, the more things stay the same, right?
It doesn't change. The same things happen, just in a new suit and maybe faster, and the
Yeah,
scale
maybe
is
faster.
bigger. But the fundamentals, the values, the situations stay the same. And I think there's a lot of things. The problem is that, you know, it's a beautiful quote. I forget, I think it was Picasso said it, or someone. It said, "When I was 5, my father knew everything. When I was 15, he knew nothing. When I was 25, I was surprised how much he learned in those 10 years." You know? And it's like, you know, it's the cycle of life, right? Like, you don't value it until then you get a little older. You're like, yeah, you know, those old, you know, my dad knew a thing or two, or my mom, you know, she was right about some things.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's like, you know, like my friend said, he has the best quote ever. He said, "Experience is what you get when you get nothing else." You know, and they've got a lot of experience, you know.
Sure, sure. And I mean, not to answer my own question, but I do feel like you mentioned previously, as far as, you know, worrying about safety and whatever, making sure that there isn't some dark future based on Mindbank, that it's not the next thing which destroys the world or whatever.
Yeah.
I do think people who are worried about being replaced by these computers can take solace that you mentioned earlier that the AI does not gain information after you die. When you die, your journey ends, and it's not going to try to be you and continue adding things to your journey that you weren't there for. But then, even then, if the technology goes that way, and even if it did get there where you felt that, like, if the company or whoever, someone, other company doing a similar thing says, no, we're going to get your brain down to the last detail and we're just going to continue your story and you can be a digital copy. You know, you mentioned digital afterlife, so to speak. And for me, so long as my thoughts, not just my thoughts, but my way of thinking, my way of developing thoughts is maintained, and that is not artificial. Or, I mean, it is, but so long as it's true, I do think that I am I don't know, couple of kilogram computer up in here, basically, that's housed in a fancy box that's able to do some stuff. And I'm okay with my information continuing. So I don't know. I feel like either way, the only danger is half measures, I guess, that, like, if people don't kind of commit one way or the other and say that, try to stick in the gray zone. And I think that's always with dystopian science fiction, that the science fiction writers take things just far enough to be scary, but then don't continue that path to the kind of natural conclusion for that. Case in point, the fact that in things like Terminator, for some reason, the robots all have humanoid bodies. Like, there is 0 point for a computer doing that.
Yeah.
But it's just enough to be scary.
Yeah, it's about internalization. I guess to your point, one of the things that the EU just put out a bill or a law or whatever around AI. One of the points they have is that AI should not change behavior or something along those lines. Like, it shouldn't be used to change behavior or manipulate behavior, right? I think that's kind of how they meant to word it. And what they mean by that is misinformation to tell you something else. And that's kind of like the context of it. So I think there's some relevance to that about changing behavior. But this is a deeper question, Rory, from a philosophical perspective.
Yeah.
And, I
probably
personally
too much for the scope of this.
I think we're not, I think as a species, we don't have the answer to that yet, quite honestly. You know what I mean?
No, it's very a personal kind of philosophy that we, as you said, as a species, we don't.
Yeah, and I would say from a perspective of, like, let's look at what do we have to kind of help answer that question. And you look at religion, right? You look at philosophy. They're ingrained values, right, of a person who lived at one point in time that we believe in, right? And some more than others, right? And I think the important thing there is the values, not so much the being, right? What this person taught us, what this person preached, what this person said, has, and how you interpret that is where, how it lives on, really, And in the case of your personal digital twin, it's your story, it's your life and your values at this particular moment in time. Does it then continue to live on afterwards? I think it lives on from at least the way we see it today is that it lives on from a repository perspective.
Yeah.
It's the place, this person lived. This is what he,
as said, it's a lot less dangerous as an intelligence if it's not able to, as I said in Black Mirror, like, the girl falls back in love with this AI of her dead boyfriend who's talking through text messages. But that's because she's bringing up stuff and they're doing a continued conversation, and the AI is adapting and trying to guess what the boyfriend would say through this ongoing thing and basically just living the experience. If it, as as a repository, that danger is averted, it's sidestepped, because you get the stories of your ancestors, and you might even get some comforting words from them, but at the end of the day, it is not them, and there's an important line that's being drawn there.
Yeah, exactly. And let's see, maybe ask me the same question in 20 years and we'll see.
Sure, because technology, man.
Yeah, let's see. And the society might have been developed at a certain point in time, and I think there's many things, philosophically speaking, like how do we change as humans once we leave this planet? Do we change our philosophy of life? There's many things that are happening now that we don't even realize. Like one of the points that I mentioned earlier about our CSR program, whereas that from a historical perspective, for thousands of millions of years, we've been multilingual as a species, right? 4 to 5 languages as a species, really. Yeah. And it's only in the last like 3 or so hundred years that most people just speak one language now, right? And what impact does that have to our brains as a species? We don't even know yet. Are we becoming more nationalistic? Are we becoming more aggressive? I don't even know, and that's something that we don't even know yet, right? Like, because it's just in our face now.
This goes beyond scope of interview, and I don't know how that we might need to close this up soon because I'm past a lot of time already. But so on the topic of language, we have things like Neuralink, and we have better translating services and various things. And I've imagined a couple of times a case where we get a universal language, that we get just a single language. And specifically that with the advent of artificial intelligences being able to add nuance, that if I'm able to think about red, I say that the box is red, but I mean that it's a certain shade of burgundy and whatever, but my computer tells your computer those extra details that we need, and so I'm able to convey the perfect information with very simple words. And for a while, I feel like this is a very cool thing, because if you can convey complex thoughts with simple language, then that opens up a lot of doors. But then, as you mentioned, we used to have many more languages. And as someone who speaks several languages yourself, I'm sure that you know that there's a lot of nuance and things which exist in one language that the simple thought, the mind frame for that word or phrase doesn't exist in other languages. And as a particular example, there's an oft-quoted study about how Amazon tribe has like 13 different words for green. And for them, they can distinguish all of these colors of green. And for another person going down there, they look, and because we lack the different names for the colors, we can't even perceive that the colors are different. And I worry that when we lose language, we could also lose the ability to differentiate these exact nuanced things that initially the universal language solved.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what can happen, and no one really knows what the result of that would be.
Yeah.
It's never happened in the history of humanity.
No, so I mean, that's almost everything with technology these days, right?
It's not even, I guess you can call it technology. It got to be the most amazing thing in the world, that everyone has one language and kumbaya and we're all Ubuntu and everybody's together, or it could have completely opposite effect, potentially. That we can't communicate at all, because your idea of red is very different from my idea of red, even though we say the word red. Sure. That could happen too, But in that note, I think if we look back to the mission of Mind Bank, right, to move humanity forward, we hope to, in the course of our life as a company, maybe answer that question, maybe somehow contribute to to helping us not lose our multilingualness, with being able to store cultures and things like that. Because language is a window into culture. And if we can continue to capture people's stories, build your digital twin, then it could be that maybe, Roy, you and I don't understand each other, but our digital twins can tell us, hey,
I can
easy, guys.
translate for us, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Take it easy, guys. This is what he really meant, like mediators, who knows, that could totally be the case.
No, that's a very interesting window that my digital twin learns about me and it knows me and it's able to share my story, but it doesn't need to share my story in my exact words. It can learn another digital twin on a network can learn your culture and how your language processing works and give the same intent of my story in a way that someone else is better able to understand. And complicated stuff that if you told me that this is what you're doing right now, that this is a year away from being developed, I wouldn't believe you, because that's
50-year plan, man. 50-year plan.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we are out of time. So take a second, tell everyone where they can find more information, any shout outs you want to make.
No, definitely. So just please, mindbank.ai is our website. There you can find out about the company, what we're up to, sign up for the pre-sales or newsletter. And if you're interested in getting in contact with me, you can do it on LinkedIn, just Google or whatever, LinkedIn me at Emil Jimenez, or you can email me at emil@mindbank.ai. I'm always open to talk to anyone. And, our focus right now is building a great product and getting enough funding so that we can, continue our goals here and our mission of moving humanity forward. Thank you for your time. It's been great.
Yeah. And I'll link everything down in description box. Thank you so much for joining me today, and you have a good one.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
All right.